Welcome back to the Go Have Good Sex podcast, the show where faith and pleasure finally stop fighting. I'm Angela, the Christian sexpert, sex coach, truth teller, and your new favorite bedtime devotional. If you're ready to go deeper, check out my resources for couples and individuals, from my free 15-minute coaching consults to spicy but faith-friendly resources like the Marriage Playdate, to my Patreon, where I teach you all the things your church aunties never told you about. And yeah, you know I've got it covered with merch, journals, bookmarks, and everything in between at thechristiansexpert.com. So whether you're here to learn, to heal, or to spice things up with scripture and sass, I'm your girl, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into today's episode, and remember, go have good sex. Welcome back to Go Have Good Sex. I'm Angela, the Christian sexpert, and today we're totally going to nerd out in the best way possible because we're talking about somatic therapies, the nervous system, and what really happens in your brain and your body when intimacy feels safe and connecting or when it doesn't. If you've ever wondered why certain experiences left you feeling shut down, numb, resentful, even in marriage, there's a science behind it. My guest today is Dr. Karianne Bilsky. She's a psychologist, researcher, and trauma expert who's going to help us understand the nervous system and how that shapes our desire, arousal, and safety. We're going to unpack what happens during sacrificial sex, you know, the obligation sex that we're told that we have to give to keep his nervous system regulated, how implicit memory wires our body's automatic responses, and more importantly, how healing and rewiring are possible. So grab your favorite little drinky, get comfy, and let's talk about what it really means to honor the body God gave us and move towards intimacy that is wanted, safe, and connected. Let's dive in. So, Dr. Karianne, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
I am so excited about this because this is the type of stuff that I nerd out over all the time. And I love taking this sort of super geeky, sciencey information and helping to translate it for people to make it more accessible, especially because I feel like evangelical Christianity has been sort of anti-science for a long time. And so I love when researchers and doctors and therapists like you are like, no, 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 these things coexist and they do it perfect because God designed science. And so I love helping take this sort of research and making it more accessible for everyone. So thank you. I'm super excited. All right. So, in that vein, for those who are brand new to this, what is a simple way to understand the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses in the context of intimacy and sex?
So, in order to understand that, because it's an excellent question, especially when we're talking about intimacy and sex, but it's pretty much the way it operates in other scenarios as well. So, our body's nervous system has a part that we can control voluntarily. I move my arm, I chose to do that. But it also has a part that is not under our voluntary conscious control, and that controls pretty much everything else that needs to keep us alive. So, breathing and heart rate and digestion and all of that. In order to do that, the body is constantly sending information to the brain about what's happening. So, sensations, feedback in the body, things happening outside of the body. And the brain is constantly scanning that. It's pretty amazing when you think about just the volume of information that is probably giving to our brains. But there are certain parts of the brain that are designed to take that information and very quickly, rapidly, before we can even almost realize it, respond to it. It categorizes it and it responds. And those responses could be we need to get away from this, which is flight. We need to push back, or we need to kind of fight through this, which is fight. Freeze is There's no escape. We're not able to get out of this situation and we maybe don't know how. We're overwhelmed. Then you're going to get freeze, which is where everything becomes very quiet and shut down in some way. And then there's also fawn, which is when we try to sort of appease the other person. We try to keep them happy, prevent rupture in a relationship in order to stay in that safe place for ourselves.
So I think what we are likely seeing a lot when it comes to obligation sex messaging is a lot of fawning that Christian women are doing in their marriages.
Yes, and in some ways, I would say it's part of what's tricky is the fawn response is one of the toughest to recognize almost because it kind of crosses over with being social, being nice, connecting, trying to keep things, on an even footing
Nice
with
word.
people.
Mm.
The nice word, yes. Um, but what actually happens is the part of our nervous system that runs these responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It's the same part of the nervous system that runs it in the like positive, healthier direction. But if it's in response to a threat, something that the brain perceives as a threat, an overwhelming thing, something I can't escape, it's going to go in the direction of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. If it's not in response to threat, if instead there's a nice like banquet of safety, then that's when that connection and that smiling and social nicety can actually be what we want it to look like in intimacy, which is safety and connection.
So I want to we didn't even make it past the first question on my list. It's so on brand. Um, I want to define for a minute because I actually so for my viewers, I actually came across Karianne because she was showing up really well in my Facebook comments arguing against obligation sex messaging. And it was so supportive and I reached out privately and I was like, thank you. Like there was a really bad video the video had gone so sideways and I was like, "Meh," and I quit being a creator. This is dumb. Um, but she has showed up so well and said things in a way that like I was too frustrated to express, and so we started chatting and anyhow, and then I found out what she did, and I was like, "What? This is amazing." So anyhow, I one of the things that we see a lot in my comment sections are men who and women, honestly, there's a lot of women who don't understand that, "Well, what do you mean sex with your husband is a threat?" What do you mean? Like, you
Yeah.
are married. No, he's not raping you. Nobody's holding you down with a your husband's not holding you down with a gun to your head and raping you for the most part. That absolutely can happen in marriages. But for the most part, when people are purposefully misunderstanding what we talk about when we say threat in relation to marital relations, can you explain what we're actually talking about?
I actually love that you asked that question because I think it's so important. Sort of what it helps to point out that what we might mean by threat in terms of the nervous system is not what we think of as kind of everyday.
Bodily harm.
Yes, exactly. So, an analogy or an illustration that I like to use is if you're thinking about eating and food. So, there are times, if anybody's ever gotten the stomach virus, they know what I mean. There are times when you're nauseated, or if you've ever had morning sickness from pregnancy, you're nauseated. There is no desire whatsoever for food, even though it may be nutritious, it may taste nice at other times, but
I am cracking up because this is the most perfect illustration because when I was pregnant, I had hypermesis, and there were times where my husband would beg me to
Mhm.
eat, and he would use and like it so perfectly illustrates sex,
Yes.
right? Like this illustration, because here's my husband begging me to
Yeah.
do the thing that I didn't want to do.
And it's like intellectually, you know, or you want to do it, or you but
Yeah,
your body is it's just rejecting it at that time. And so in that sense, if you force yourself to eat, or even if you're already full, if you force yourself to eat, there's discomfort. Your body may reject it to the point of vomiting. There's distress that's connected to it because you're just nauseated and it's ugh, you know. It's not that you dislike food. It's not that you dislike eating. It is that your body is not in a place to be able to receive and digest what you're putting into it. And trying to make that happen is actually at a biological level perceived as a threat. And by threat, I mean like violating where the body's limits are at that time. Our bodies don't like that. So, for example, one other thought is if you've ever been somewhere and like out in the rain or something, and you look and a drop of water almost lands in your eye. Okay, the drop of water isn't going to hurt us and cause major physical injury, most likely. But the body encodes it as a threat before we can even realize it.
that air puff machine at the eye doctor. You have to do it,
You do.
but I'm definitely trying to run away, and they get annoyed with me because they're like, "You have to stay still." I'm like, "But it's going to attack me." It's literally just a puff of air, but I feel attacked. My nervous system feels
Yes.
attacked.
Yes, because part of the it's the unpredictability and it's the
Mhm.
unpleasantness. Even like you know that the air is not going to hurt you. You know this. But what's your body doing anyway? It's bracing. It's like trying you're having to fight your body's automatic responses.
And I even feel a spike of adrenaline after I do that stupid machine.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
it okay, we're just going to be talking about all of my trauma ever today. All right. So, just as a side note, if anyone wants to learn a little bit more or um, find another sort of illustration to help understand your body's nervous system and fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses in this context, Emily Nagoski has an amazing passage in her book, Come As You Are, that talks about how our brains are still living in caves fighting lions and doesn't understand that your boss isn't trying to rip you apart. And our brains perceive that in the same way. And so that book has a great section on exactly this. If you want to go and highlight it and make your husband read it or something, I don't know your life, but just as a side note, if you want to go deeper in that particular section, it's a great place to start. And speaking of, she also talks about gas pedals and brakes in regards to our nervous systems and our arousal and safety. So, can you tell us about how the parasympathetic and the sympathetic systems, and maybe give a little quick little, like what's the parasympathetic? That oh, the words parasympathetic and sympathetic, and how they relate to the gas pedal and the brake and all of that. You know what I'm asking.
I know. Yes. All right. So, the beauty of these systems is that again, they do their job, but they do it sort of in different directions depending on whether the brain has sensed safety, high levels of safety, especially when we're talking about sex. And I don't mean safety from the person's not going to physically hurt me. I mean deep, profound relational, emotional safety and trust. So, parasympathetic is the calm down system or the safety system, by and large. Sympathetic is the one that drives sort of excitement and let's go and action. So, when there's threat or, let's say, distress, pressure, the sympathetic nervous system will get activated, and it will get activated to fight or flight. So there's avoidance, there's, kind of getting maybe a bit like pushing back on things, getting busy with other stuff. There's freeze, which is I'm still and I don't know what to say and I can't say anything. That's one way it could look. And then there's the fawn that we've talked about. Um, but on the other side,
There's also fight because I have
yeah,
seen couples talk about where, every time I say, "Hey, do you wanna have sex?" She starts a fight. So, that
yeah,
can absolutely be a thing too.
it can. I'm glad that you pointed that out. And actually, I wanted to kind of go back to what I was saying. So the fight, flight are primarily kind of driving through the sympathetic nervous system. The freeze is primarily going through the parasympathetic or like the calm down, shut down system. But it's not, oh, this is a relaxed calm down. It is, this is an overload, pressured, stressed out kind of shutdown. And that's how that part of the nervous system responds in when there's stress or when there's pressure.
So, your brain is basically Windows 95 trying to download something on LimeWire, and
Yes. Yeah,
just
pretty
the whole
much.
system stops.
Blue screen, blue screen of death.
Just I'm showing my age here.
That-
Okay.
um, so when that shutdown happens, there's some debate about this. So I wouldn't, tell people this is the absolute definitive. There's never going to be anything else discovered about this. But some of the debate is that when that happens, it's almost a bit like the nervous system is anesthetizing itself because it's trying to decrease pain, decrease um, resource spending in
Mhm.
order to be able to just kind of get through the moment. And just in hearing that, I think we can begin to see why that is detrimental to sex and intimacy. Um, but then when there's safety on board, the sympathetic nervous system, instead of fight or flight, is about creativity and exploration and play and arousal and all of these kind of, ooh, let me go do this, let me go do that. It's kind of lighting up with excitement and eagerness. The connection that happens isn't fawning. It's not, I'm trying to be nice so that you don't get mad at me or so that we can just get through this. It's, I'm genuinely enjoying, communicating with you and connecting. And then the parasympathetic or the calm down, shutdown system is profoundly restful shutdown. It's intimacy, it's rest, it's awe and wonder and digestion and all of the things that our body needs to be able to do to function. And
It's
that,
that deep sense of satiation that
yes.
people describe post-sex.
Yes, I have a picture that goes with when I describe this with clients, and the picture is of a father, and he has a baby on his chest, and they're both sleeping. And it's like that sort of just safe containment and like you said, just satiation,
Mhm.
completely able to just let go of all stress.
Yeah. I have women frequently ask me, um, I don't understand why people talk about loving sex so much because I don't feel good afterwards. They're like, people talk about feeling relaxed and happy and, satiated after sex, and I don't feel that way after sex. And so if that is describing you right now, please take this as your indication that something is wrong in the sex that you're having, because healthy women and safe marriages don't turn down good sex for no reason. So if you are not feeling satiated and rested and deeply connected during and after sex, there's a big problem. Hopefully we can start to give you some ideas of how to fix that a little bit later in the episode. Um, I really want to make sure that we kind of define this idea of sacrificial sex, what it is, why people are doing it. We've talked a little bit about like what they might be experiencing when they're doing it, but what is sacrificial sex, and why do you see women especially engaging in it?
Sacrificial sex is when a person, in this case, often women, but chooses to engage in sexual intimacy when they're not actually experiencing interest, desire. Bottom line is they don't want to. We're not talking about responsive desire where, let's see, I'm open to seeing where this could go, and I might kind of get into it along the way. It's no, I really am not interested. In fact, I might want the opposite, like to actually mm, get as far away from it, maybe in the moment as possible. But I'm going to choose to have sex anyway. I'm going to choose to have sexual intimacy as a matter of willpower and kind of giving this to my spouse as part of my showing love for them. Is there anything you would add to that from your perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. What I see a lot is people trying to spiritualize the act of sacrificial sex. And they will say, well, the Bible says that we have to love our spouses sacrificially. We all have to do things that we don't want to do to show our spouse that we love them.
Mhm.
One of the things that I see a lot is, well, my husband doesn't want to sit and listen to my emotions. So the least I can do is give him sex. That's what he really wants. Don't okay, look, now I'm just going to start ranting. Um, there is no model for sacrificial sex in the Bible. There is no scripture that links using your body as a way to regulate his emotions and behavior in the Bible, because that's what sacrificial sex is really boiling down to most often. Now, you could be married to a really great man who truly has no idea that this is what you're doing, and you've just internalized these sorts of messages from the church and toxic women's Facebook groups, right? That men need sex, you have to give it to him to keep him happy, blah, blah, blah. But, he might have no idea and would be horrified that you are having sex that you don't want because you think that you have to show him love. But I do know that there's a lot of marriages where women are engaging in sacrificial sex because if they don't, he's going to get crabby. He's going to not treat the children well. And she has to do it to manage his big feelings and his behavior for the next probably 3 days before she has to do it again. So I'm gonna stop there because I'll keep ranting, and that's not the point of the episode. Okay, so why is sacrificial sex as a not actually biblically backed concept so very damaging
Mhm.
to female sexuality and marriages overall?
Well, this goes back to, again, talking about the nervous system and how our body is designed. And I happen to think that God knew what he was doing when he did that. Um, but then when you have sexual intimacy happening, when um, the person's not feeling safe, and I mean that deep sense of safety to be able to say, I'm really not feeling like it right now. Can we please do something else? It may be just an internal sense of pressure, even that can still have the same, um, ramifications. But what happens is when we're in situations where the nervous system is going like fight or flight, freeze, on, where it's essentially trying to deal with distress or being trying to force it into a direction that it's just not in, the brain begins to associate what's happening with that experience. So, if I'll give an example. When I was a kid, loved lasagna. I ate lasagna one time. I don't know why I got sick. I vomited. I couldn't eat lasagna for years after that. So when our body is responding to something in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state, if we keep doing it anyway, now the brain begins to associate it at a very core level, associate sex, associate anything around sex, begins to associate it with threat and freeze and flight and fight and fawn. So it ends up making the next encounters more difficult and the encounters after that more difficult. So it's kind of like just piling on more and more that a person has to try to deal with because that limit is constantly being pushed or just driven right over.
So you call the amygdala the smoke detector of the brain. And so what does that have to do with flagging sex as safe versus dangerous? Again, nobody's holding a, knife to you, but that safety. And also kind of like, what is the amygdala and why is it the smoke detector?
Well, let me start with what is it and why is it the smoke detector? Um, so the amygdala is going to be hard.
Side note, if you are watching on video, she's got a little brain model that's so cute.
So the amygdala sits pretty close to where information comes up from our spinal cord. It's one of the first things that information hits in our nervous system when it comes into the brain. Not the first, but one of the first. And the reason is that, again, as you said, it's the smoke detector. Its job is to flag anything that could be relevant and whether it's good for us or potentially going to hurt us. It has to do that exceptionally fast. If we have a car that just cuts in front of us, by the time all of the processing happens to say, okay, what is the likelihood that this or that or the other is going to happen? It's done. We've already run into the car in front of us. So the amygdala has to operate very fast, very reflexively in order to mobilize the rest of what the body needs in order to be able to respond, to keep us safe, to keep our boundaries intact, to keep us from being overwhelmed. So it's a critical part of the brain, and where it's located actually means that the information doesn't have to travel as far. It can respond very quickly because of where it's located. Um, so it has a super important function, but when it's connected with memories of times where we've been in distress, we've had to override our own body's signals, even if we are not being physically harmed in the moment, the amygdala is going to go off the next time, kind of like smoke detector that's overly sensitive and goes off, when you're cooking and there's some steam from pasta boiling.
So this is reminding me of the brakes and the accelerator then. It sounds like the amygdala is really controlling because I think I might have distracted you and we didn't actually answer the brake and accelerator
Oh,
question.
I think we did.
Um like I think we did, but I think we actually like left out the okay. So there's this idea that certain things will hit your accelerator for your sexuality. So for some women, they might be visual. Don't tell the men. But seeing their husband roll up his shirt sleeves and seeing his forearms might turn them on, and that might act as an accelerator. Don't tell the men, guys. They think we're not visually stimulated.
I think that there are not many routes to get there.
But then we also have the breaks, which, if we're gonna stick with this whole visual thing, like seeing your husband scratch his balls might be a turn off, right?
Mm,
So it's really like the brakes and the accelerator are sort of a way to describe like turn on and turn offs, but they go a little deeper. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
especially as it relates to the amygdala, because I see the connection there.
Yes. And I'm glad that you are kind of threading back to that, because when the amygdala is activated, when it's flagging something, it can sometimes get stuck there. Or it can be just on, it's like lighted up almost,
Mhm.
because well, we have this to do and we have that to do, and there's this to get done and this to get done, and I have to remember this, and then this didn't happen, and I don't feel well here. It's the amygdala does get activated when we're under stress, as in we don't have enough time, we're feeling tired but have to keep going, all of those things. So if the amygdala is turned on, it's a massive break. It's a break that you really, no matter how much you press on the accelerator, it it doesn't go anywhere. That is how forceful of a break it is, because it's meant to be protective. It's meant to help us stop before we just kind of run ourselves into the ground and wear ourselves out. So the amygdala, when it's on, regardless of the reason, it's a break. And that break is going to override pretty much everything else. So in order for the accelerators to have any impact, we need to kind of release the break, which is why safety, emotional connection, understanding, conversational connection, all of those things are so critical, because it's not just about turn ons and turn offs. They're important, they're part of the picture. But those things are part of what help to release the break and signal to the brain, in this case, a lot of times women's brain, but honestly, anyone's, can be man, can be woman, signals to their brain, they've got me. Like they've got me. They see me, they understand me, they know me. I am able to be free and at peace here. And once that break is off, if an accelerator is going to come in, now it naturally can.
Okay, so what I'm hearing all of my listeners whispering in my ear right now is, how do I turn off my amygdala then?
Yeah. I'm laughing because you might think that it's easy to do that just by like, okay, well, I'm going to turn it off.
We all look, they all love a good list. They want you to tell them what to do.
Ah, well,
Dr. Karianne, just give me the 5 steps to tell my husband what to do so that I can give him sex so he gets off my back.
and this is where your listeners may be incredibly disappointed with me, as I sometimes joke with my clients about, and I'm going to say it depends, which
Yeah.
is it's so personalized, but that's really the answer. It's so personalized. There are some things that in general can help our body get to a more restful state. However, each person has their own stresses and triggers and things that have built up over time. However, what can be done is that we can't turn off the amygdala by trying harder or trying more, because what that's doing is it's not really taking our foot off the brake or releasing the brake. It's pressing down harder on the accelerator. So it's not going to get that intended effect. It's like trying to make yourself fall asleep. And if you've lived long enough, you've reached a point where you've tried to do that.
Every woman in perimenopause cries in perimenopause right now.
And they're all going, I feel seen. Uh, Trying to fall asleep actively works against sleep unfolding. It's just one of those things about our biology and physiology. So the first step is to learn and become more aware of your own nervous system's signals. So, learning, what does your body feel like when it's in fight or flight? What about when it's in freeze? or fawn? What do you do?
Oh, you mean we have to feel our feelings? Gross.
Yeah, and you also have to feel your body too, which, you know, adds another layer that as women, we've, never had to deal with distress about the sarcasm alert. We've never had to deal with stress about sensing our bodies or their shape or their size or anything like that.
So you are bringing up some buzzwords. Nervous system regulation. Another one that we hear a lot on social media is like vagus nerve reset. When we're talking about nervous system regulation, do you have any resources that you like to suggest for people to learn about those sorts of gross things?
I do. Yes. And because we are not only physical people, we're also emotional, we're also spiritual, we sometimes need to take several different routes to help get the amygdala to quiet down. So, some of the resources that I talk about are somatic resources, physical resources. So, it can be kind of quick ways to reset briefly.
Okay, so you said somatic, and now that sounds weird, and that sounds like something that is like, I don't know, new agey or something. Can Christians do somatic stuff? What is it?
Somatic just means body. It's often used in by doctors and physicians, but we don't usually hear it in kind of day-to-day conversation. But somatic just means using your body. And I don't advocate using your body in any way that is anti-biblical. So we find quick ways and more kind of long-term ways to help nudge the body to start taking the brake off. And it could be slowing and pacing the breathing. It can be deep muscle, progressive relaxation. It can be self havening, which is an interesting concept, which I don't know if that has come up previously.
I can guarantee that most of my listeners have not heard it. So what is that?
Self havening is where we use touch, our own touch, to help activate the sense of safety and calm. And we tend to do it sometimes without being aware of it, like when people sort of start twirling their hair or they kind of just absentmindedly are doing this. It's more purposeful.
She was rubbing her own arm for those
Yes,
who are
I
not watching video.
forget it. Those are not watching video. Yeah. It's like rubbing your own arm, twirling your hair, but it's more directed. It's more purposeful than
Mhm.
that to basically use your own hands to help regulate or calm the body and the nervous system.
So, as a side note, I did a podcast episode with Maud Johnson. I think her last name is Johnson, about massage a couple months ago, I think. I will put the link to that episode in the show notes, but you can go back and listen to that episode because she actually talks about using massage with your spouse, but she describes some techniques that you can absolutely adapt to your own body and your own self, specifically um, things that are going to cross your midline. So, like using your right hand to massage your left foot would be a fantastic tool for this sort of self-havening concept, because crossing the midline helps with that sort, and the midline is literally just the center of your body. So that's when you are taking something from, like, using your right hand to tap your left shoulder, your left hand to tap your right shoulder. That is crossing your midline. So just as a side note, I will put that episode in the show notes. So these are some really great ways that you have described for getting your amygdala to calm down. One of the things that I think that is not discussed enough when we are talking about like nervous system regulation and things like that is co-regulation between spouses. If you are in the gentle parenting, respectful parenting, attachment parenting community, you hear a lot of discussion about co-regulating with your children, right? Children are not tiny adults. Children have underdeveloped brains. It's like God designed them that way, people. And so children need to borrow our nervous systems to regulate their own nervous systems. So that's why screaming at a screaming kid doesn't actually get them to stop screaming in a healthy way. You might scare them into shutting up, but you haven't actually taught them any sort of healthy emotional regulation, right? Um, and so we talk in parenting a lot about co-regulating with our children. But can you talk, since we're like in this space, can you talk about co-regulating with your spouse?
Absolutely. And this is why I will just highlight, this is why the having emotional discussions, conversational intimacy, all the different types of intimacy that I know you talk about, and promote, that's why this is important, because all of that is exercising co-regulation in different ways so that when sexual intimacy happens, the trust, the safety, the deep sense of knowing, all of that has a beautiful foundation. And it means that the break often doesn't have to get applied as much. So, co regulation is, it gets into some pretty cool brain stuff, which I also geek out about. And so I'm glad when you stop me and slow me down if I start throwing out jargon. Um, but the brain has specific cells, specific type of brain cells. We have lots of different types, but there's a specific kind of neuron, which is a brain cell, and it's called a mirror neuron. And the mirror neurons, it's kind of what it sounds like. They mirror what we see, what we're picking up in the other person. So even if we're not copying their facial expressions, we're picking it up. It's like almost getting mirrored inside our own brains to a small degree. That's what helps to build empathy. But the other part of it is that is why when someone else is really sad or upset or angry or worried, we can start feeling a bit off ourselves because we connect with each other. We're not built or created to be in isolation. So our nervous systems kind of switch off of each other. We play off of each other, or in more stressful times, we escalate off of each other. So that co-regulation can have a ton to do with sexual intimacy.
What are some specific ways that you like to suggest couples co-regulate?
Some of the first ways that I like to talk about co-regulating actually then goes into another direction, which is really great and has a good evidence base, which pulls from the Gottmans. So, John Gottman's research on what helps marriages last. And quite frankly, after looking at them, they're all consistent with scripture. So, wow, go figure. Um,
Oh, no.
so, softened startups. So, approaching things in conversation gently and kind of not coming in with harshness, sarcasm, blame, criticism, but saying, here's what's happening. Can we talk about this? Hold on. Can we slow down? I'm feeling overwhelmed. Those are kind of softened startups to be able to really slow the process down in conversation. And then if either person in the couple starts to feel overwhelmed, it's an automatic break. It's an automatic timeout. We're going to do something together separately, whether that's breathing, whether that's cuddling, whether that's going for a walk. We're going to do something to help kind of, again, bring the nervous system back into a normal range and then go back to what we were talking about. Soften startup, taking breaks, when somebody starts to begin to feel overwhelmed, tearful, frustrated, um, and then really working to be non-defensive. And this is one of the areas where I think husbands can do so much good for their marriage if they're able to hear the concerns without defensiveness, because that is going to communicate so much safety to their spouse, to their wife who's sharing something that might be very nerve-wracking, causing a lot of guilt or worry or frustration for her. So I really encourage couples to start with some of those basics. And then if they need something beyond that, we can talk about additional steps.
So, one of the things that I love suggesting for couples for co-regulating, I think I mentioned it in the massage episode. But it's real quick and easy and it feels goofy as I'll get out like the first 2 or 3 times that you do it. I know. Okay, just do it. Just do it. I don't want to hear you complaining about how it feels awkward. Hush up and do it as you're told. Okay? Um but what I like to suggest is couples place their hands on each other's chests. And this is not an opportunity to grope. This is literally above the breast, like on the, like just below the collarbone. And just sync your breathing with each other for 30 to 60 seconds. And you don't, if you're neurospicy and eye contact feels like you're getting stabbed, in the face, you don't have to look into each other's eyes. You can close your eyes. It's okay. Eye contact is overrated by the neurotypicals. You can just put your hands on each other's chests and sync your breathing. And that will do wonders for co-regulating. So there, if you get nothing else from the episode, there's your magic tip of the and look, I know I told you it feels goofy the first time you do it. I get it. Just do it anyway. All right. Um, so let's talk about consent. One of my favorite topics. Consent is more than just saying yes. So I want to hear how you describe consent in sex in marriage.
So I often use the fries model,
Yes.
um, and kind of also even with a bit more of an extension with what we're talking about. So when I uh, approach consent, it has to be free. It has to be able to be reversible without consequence. It needs to be informed, enthusiastic, and why am I blanking on the S right now?
Specific.
Specific. There we go. Specific. So I could certainly imagine someone saying either, oh my goodness, so do we have to talk about every little step every single time we have sex? That's not what it means. It does,
But you can.
you can. Yes.
There are a lot of couples who derive great pleasure from talking about every little step of the process and
Yeah.
consenting.
And making it very
So
clear.
yeah,
Yeah, you absolutely can. But having all of those components is necessary for genuine consent. So even if a person says yes, when their body is in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, most likely in this case, freeze or fawn, that's not the part of the brain that is involved in making those kinds of decisions is not online at that moment.
which is why the enthusiastic piece of the fries model is so imperative because a yes given from a freeze or fawn state is not an enthusiastic yes.
Correct. And we can tell the difference in body language. So,
Not only body language, but also physical signs of arousal.
yes.
And physical signs of arousal for women specifically, her level of wetness is not necessarily an indicator of physical arousal or interest. In fact, she could be the mentally the hottest that she has ever been in her entire life and be completely dry because it's arousal non-concordance is a real thing. And please stop using the level of witness as an indicator. It's not a barometer, people. It's not it's not how that works. Um, Also, on the topic of consent, have you heard of Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent? Have you come across that
I
yet?
don't think I've come across it. No.
Okay, so I have been geeking out over Dr. Cami Hurst. She is doing a lot of research on um, consenting to unwanted sex, as she has termed it. And I'm going to drop all of this stuff in the show notes for you guys. But she did an episode with Betty Martin, who has a wheel of consent, and it goes a little more nuanced than just like enthusiastic consent. It talks about things like implied, well, I don't want to say specifically the things that it talks about because my brain, we all know my brain is special and I don't want to get it wrong. So I'm just going to drop it in the show notes for you guys to research more on your own. On a related note, I want to, because you said people are like, well, now do I have to like talk about every single, do I have to ask permission to, kiss her lips, but then also kiss her cheek? There are especially if you've been married for a long time, you have what is called implied consent. And an implied consent is really important too, because like there are certain things that you guys have been doing for 20 years that the consent is there. It's implied that you know that she loves when you kiss inside of her elbow or whatever, right? Like,
Yes.
so there's nuance to the conversation of consent. But go ahead.
There definitely is. And being specific, really, I think one way to think about it is it's don't go somewhere if you're not discussing it with your spouse that you're headed there. Um, it's not a
And there's
card, it's not a blank check.
Yeah, and there's ways to ask for consent in the moment too. You know, you have to moan louder if you want me to keep going. Is, you can ask for consent in the moment without breaking the moment.
Yes.
Like scream louder if you want me to keep going. Tell me exactly what you want me to do to you. Tell me exactly where you want me to kiss you. Tell me exactly where you want me to put my fingers, mouth, whatever, right? So you can be asking for consent in the moment as well. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up consent because when we're talking about, nervous system regulation, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, my my very slight speech impediment struggles with that phrase every single time. Um, why is it so hard? All of these things can contrigute over time to trauma, right? So like if you have trauma in one area, then the trauma can be re-triggered, but even unintentionally, right?
Yeah.
By something and all of the things. So I would love if we can talk about how trauma, and we're going to use a big word and you're going to talk about it, neuroendocrine risk factors, which are like stress hormones or immune responses. What do you mean, like immune responses when we're talking about sex? So how does this all of this help shape the way someone experiences sex and intimacy?
It's such a great question, and it's an area that I think rarely gets touched on at all. I mean, we might talk about trauma getting triggered, but
Yeah, like the
yeah,
I I try and talk about this some, not in like the super nerdy way that we're talking about it now, but like I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. So please talk
yeah,
about it.
yeah. So one of the things that happens when the body is under stress, and I don't mean, massive, the house is falling down around me kind of a trauma. It happens then as well. But just when the body is under stress, when trauma has happened and it's being triggered or reactivated even unintentionally, the body's stress response kicks in again. And you're talking about it in terms of the nervous system, fight and flight, but also there's a whole cascade of other things that happen. So, cortisol can be released, which is a stress hormone. It's typically designed to help us on a short term basis get through situations without, basically getting sick in the middle of it. So cortisol affects our immune system. It helps to regulate it, either to regulate it down or regulate it up. And one of the things that can happen with people who've gone through trauma or are getting trauma triggered is it impacts their immune system over time in such a way that now their body has more inflammation. So the background inflammation in their body is at a higher point than people who have not had repeated trauma or, a large trauma, things like that. The inflammation then affects a lot of other things with our physical health, with our emotional health, and our mental health. So, trauma isn't just a one time event. It's not even just the one time trigger on a given day. It leaves these ripples in our body. And if we're overriding the body that God gave us to have sex that's not wanted, it's taking a physical toll on our hormone system with, stress hormones. It's taking a toll on our immune system. And it's just not the direction that makes sense if we're looking to have our body function the way that God designed it to.
So, what I'm hearing is that engaging in sacrificial sex, obligation sex, or even submitting to unwanted sex or living with a spouse who uses sexual coercion tactics can give you autoimmune disorders and physical health symptoms, is what I'm
It,
hearing.
it can certainly be tied to physical health symptoms. There would be at times other reasons that somebody would develop, say, an autoimmune disorder. Um,
There's
but
certainly like other risk factors involved, but if you're already at risk for autoimmune,
the stress of that stress typically is not a good thing, and it doesn't matter if we're saying I'm willingly choosing to say yes to this stress.
I'm cognitively choosing to say yes,
Yes, I'm cognitively choosing to say yes to this.
which
That
is
doesn't
not the same thing as my body is choosing to say yes.
correct. And sometimes for various reasons we don't know the difference. Women don't know the difference, men may not know the difference.
What? Okay.
Yes.
I think that we may need to do a Patreon special where we talk about recognizing feel like I need to write this down. Recognizing the yes, the body yes versus the cognitive yes. That might need to be a page, Patreon special. Okay, I'm like, oh, so many ideas, so many content ideas right now. Okay.
Other big words we could throw out there with that. Interoception, alexithymia. We'll just,
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Oh, that intro, I don't see, I can't even say words.
it's a tough one.
Intro,
Interoception.
that one. I had to learn about that one when my kid was little and he was struggling with some sensory stuff. Because if you have sensory issues or you are neurospicy, um, you may already be struggling with that one because it is your the ability for you to recognize your own body signals. So for a lot of like neurospicy toddlers, they're going to potty train later because their body doesn't recognize that urgency to get to the toilet, right? And that's that sort of um, sensation that that fancy word is referring to. And so if you and so when we're talking about in terms of grown-ups having sex, if you don't have a strong sense of that fancy word anyhow because of neurospiciness, you may also further struggle in the bedroom. And all of my ADHD women said, "Oh, come on. Can't I catch a break?"
I hear that. I can feel for them. Um, and also this ties back to what we were talking about, which is why it is damaging to have quote unquote sacrificial sex. Because yes, when people are neurospicy, they can have a tough time with sensing what's happening in their own body accurately or consistently. But also when there is trauma or when the freeze response is active, honestly, when anything other than safety in the nervous system is activated, it's going to be more difficult for the body to register what's happening, but especially when there is freeze. Again, it's like it's anesthetizing or numbing. So you actually start to not be able to engage with your body in the same way over time. And that actually actively works against improving sexual intimacy.
Which leads to another point that engaging in sacrificial sex, obligation sex, consenting to sexual coercion can lead to impotence.
Yes, it can, because the brake then is pressed so far down, it's just stuck.
And yeah, and just to be clear, impotence is not just for men. Women can experience it as well. So it's not just it's as with so many other things, only talked about in reference to men because men are, oh, see, I'm going to rant. It's all about men's sexual experience. The women are just there to facilitate what really matters, which is him getting an orgasm. Who cares if the women do ever? See, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna I'm gonna get it together. Okay. So what? So this has been a lot of very nerdy information. What are some signs that would indicate that it's time to get professional help? And what kind of therapist should someone look for?
So some signs that it's time to get professional help would be if your spouse is not open to talking about this, or you do not feel that your concerns are heard and taken seriously when you bring them up. If it's not possible to keep conversations without defensiveness, where there's a mutual desire to support each other, if that's not happening, seek professional help. Another sign to seek professional help would be if you try some of these things. If you try, we put our hand on each other's chests and synced our breathing. I've, tried to do some strategies to relax and educate myself about sexual response and all of that. We've got consent down. We're good. If you're noticing that your body is shutting down or going into freeze or fawn, that would also be a time to think about professional help, because then somebody who has training may be able to help support you to figure out what's going on and a path to work toward healing.
And what sort of therapist should they look for?
Well, if it is for couples therapy, I typically encourage somebody to look for someone who is licensed in their state. Every state has their own process for licenses. A lot of people, and I understand being in the Christian community myself, I understand why people want to go to biblical counseling or, talk to
Please
someone
don't.
on
Oh, who said
pastoral.
that? What? Who said that?
However, what I would say, I don't know where that came from. It might have been, me throwing my voice or you throwing your voice. I don't know. I understand why people want to do that or feel safer doing that. However, by and large, they're not they're not trained, and they can do more damage because they don't know what to look for, when to stop, what to assess. So someone who is licensed and is experienced in couples therapy, either the Gottman method couples therapy, emotion focused couples therapy, things like that. Or if it's going to be an individual therapist, I would encourage somebody who has a good expertise in working with trauma and at least a basic understanding of sexual issues and concerns. And those are things that people can ask a therapist when they reach out. You're allowed to ask them questions to see if they've got some of the kind of specialization that you're looking for.
Yes, please remember that when you are hiring a therapist or any health provider at all, you are the employer in essence. They're not in charge of you. They are not the boss. You get to ask, do you have the qualifications that I want? And like my friend was telling me that she wasn't sure, she's working with a therapist and she wasn't sure why her therapist was saying something that she was saying. I was like, "Well, did you ask her why?" And she's like, "Well, no." And I'm like, baby girl, you have the right to ask what your diagnosis is. Like they have to put a diagnosis down for to submit to your insurance. And it might be, a more nuanced diagnosis than what they're submitting to the insurance, but that's a whole other conversation. You have the right to ask, okay, well, what okay, so you're wanting to do this sort of treatment, like, you're talking about doing this thing. How does that support my goals? Also, what are my goals? Because your therapist has to submit goals to your insurance company. So, like, you can ask them what the goals are for your treatment, like, what is your treatment plan? You can ask them those things. You have a right to that sort of information. You have a right to know what their qualifications are, like what their experience is. You can even ask, like about outcomes for their patients. Um, averages and things like that. You have, and what's the worst that happens? They say no, that they're not going to provide the information. They're not going to yell at you. They're not going to, put you on the news as, oh my gosh, this person had the audacity to ask me a question. What's the worst that's going to happen if you ask? Okay.
They will say no, and then you will know that that's not a great one to go see.
Right. Like that is my rant about healthcare for
Well, here's
today.
the thing too about therapists is, um, again, informed consent, the Fry's model.
Yeah.
If you contact a therapist and you're trying to see if it's a good fit, sometimes asking more specific questions and seeing how they handle it lets you know a little bit about it. Not every therapist is an expert in every area. If somebody wanted to come see me for psychosis disorders, I would say not my specialty. Like I can support you, like I'll try to help find referrals for you, but I know that's not where I focused my time. So if you contact a therapist and there's something specific you want to work on, you can ask questions like, okay, let's say I want to work on this, or let's say I want to pursue this kind of treatment. What is the way that you do that kind of treatment? And that therapist, if they actually do the treatment, and not just say that they do the treatment, should be able to tell you, okay, well, first we start with this, and then this stage we do this, and this stage we do this. It's approximately this length of time. They should be able to just give you that information. And if they can't or don't, you might want to rethink that one.
And it's okay to interview multiple therapists before making a decision also. And going back to the strange voice who said, don't go to biblical counseling, um, I would just like to remind everyone that all therapists are ethically bound to respect your faith, whether they are a practitioner of your faith or not. So I totally get why you would not want to go to a practicing Buddhist, if your Christian faith is central to your life. However, they are still ethically bound to respect your faith, no matter their own faith. And it, some of the best therapists that I have encountered I had no idea what their faith was, but that doesn't mean that they didn't support my own faith journey in where I was at. So I think that's, on the one hand, it's a valid concern. On the other hand, it's a way that fundamentalist Christianity has fearmongered Christians into staying in the box of control within the church.
Yeah.
So and that frustrates me because it is a valid concern in some areas. So okay, I'm going to stop ranting about things. Okay, thank you. Do you have any last thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with?
One of the things I think that I find the most impactful because it ties everything together is that when we look at scripture as Christians, we see there's always a model of God providing promise, safety, shelter, care before requesting a choice to be willingly and freely made. That doesn't get reversed in marriage because we're talking about a sexual relationship. Care, concern, structure, safety, promise, commitment, that is the context in which other things can grow and flourish, within which a choice can be made that is free. And over and again in scripture, we see it's emphasized to make it willingly, free choice of your own accord. So if God doesn't override our choice, neither should sexual intimacy in marriage.
So much yes. Amen a million times. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
It was delightful. I hope that you will come again. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I would like to invite you to join my Patreon. Dr. Karianne came back and we recorded an exclusive interview on what female arousal feels like in your body. So, if you struggle to know what it feels like to be aroused, we'd love to teach you all about it in my Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. Okay, friends, let's take a deep breath together. Let that sink in. What happens in your nervous system is not a character flaw, it's biology. You aren't a bad Christian if you can't make yourself follow through with obligation sex. The beautiful message of all of this is biology can be healed and it can be rewired. If this conversation stirred something in you, know that you are not alone and you're not broken. You deserve sex that feels safe, passionate, and connecting. Thank you so much to Dr. Karianne for breaking down the science and giving us so much hope. You can find her work in the show notes. And as always, if you're ready to go deeper, grab my resources like 31 Days of Intimacy or my sex journal, Intimate Conversations. Until next time, go have good sex. That's it for today's episode. You've been blessed and probably slightly scandalized. Now, go journal, go text your man, and most of all, don't keep this to yourself. Share it, review it, slide into my DMs. Then grab a journal, a game, or a coaching spot. And remember, Jesus didn't die for you to have boring sex. So go have good sex already.